The empath comes back when detachment replaces hope. This isn't what you wanted to hear. You thought hope was keeping you alive. You thought hope was the virtue holding you together while they tore you apart. You believed that without hope, you had nothing left to fight for. But Carl Jung discovered something that shatters everything you believe about toxic relationships. Hope isn't your lifeline. Hope is your poison. And the moment you kill it, the moment you replace hope with detachment, you come back to life. Most people think hope is a virtue. They tell you to never give up hope. They say hope is what makes us human, what separates us from despair. They frame hopelessness as weakness, as giving up, as the opposite of love. But Jung discovered that in toxic dynamics, hope becomes a defense mechanism preventing you from seeing reality. It's a psychological shield you hold up to protect yourself from a truth too painful to accept. You're not hoping for love. You're hoping to avoid the devastating realization that love was never there. You cling to potential rather than reality, because reality would destroy the story you've been telling yourself about who they are and what this relationship means. This is the paradox Jung identified. The very thing you think is saving you is actually killing you. Hope keeps you returning to someone who hurts you. Hope makes you believe that this time will be different, that they'll finally see your worth, that your patience will be rewarded. But it never is. Because hope in a toxic relationship isn't hope at all. It's denial dressed up in prettier clothes. Here's what Jung understood that most people miss. Detachment isn't coldness. Detachment isn't giving up on love. Detachment is the only way to retrieve the soul fragments you lost in the relationship. Every time you poured your energy into them, you left pieces of yourself behind, the pieces that believed in their goodness, the pieces that saw their potential, the pieces that loved them despite the evidence that they couldn't love you back, those pieces of yourself scattered throughout a relationship that could never hold them, and they only come back when hope dies. You've been taught that giving up on someone is cruel, that walking away without hope makes you heartless. Society conditions us to believe that real love never quits, never stops trying, never stops hoping. But Jung knew better. He knew that empaths don't fail by losing hope. Empaths fail by keeping it. Because hope keeps you stuck in a fantasy bond with someone who exists only in your imagination. The person you love isn't real. They're a projection of your own goodness onto someone who never earned it. Think about this carefully. When you close your eyes and picture them, who do you see? Do you see the person who forgets your birthday, ignores your needs, dismisses your feelings? Or do you see the person they were during those first few weeks? The person who mirrored your energy perfectly, who said all the right things, who made you feel seen in ways you'd never felt before? That person you're hoping will come back was never real. They never existed. They were a mask, a performance, a reflection of what you needed to see so you would stay. The sooner you accept this truth, the sooner you can begin your journey home. Why do empaths tolerate abuse? Most people think it's just kindness. They see your patience and call it love. They see your endurance and call it strength. But Jung suggests it's deeper than that. It's an unconscious need to fix or save others, to feel worthy. The empath's shadow isn't just about being too giving. It's about needing to be needed. It's about believing that your value comes from how much you can endure, how much you can heal, how much you can transform someone else's darkness into light. But here's what Jung discovered about this pattern. You're not saving them. You're trying to save yourself from the belief that you're only valuable when you're rescuing someone. This need runs so deep that you don't even recognize it. You think you're being compassionate. You think you're being patient. You think you're being loving. But underneath all of that, you're desperately trying to prove that you matter by mattering to someone who can't appreciate what you give. Jung called this shadow projection. You give away parts of yourself and then become obsessed with getting them back from someone who never wanted them in the first place. The narcissist becomes your mirror, reflecting back everything you refuse to see in yourself. Your need for validation that runs deeper than you want to admit. Your fear of being ordinary, of being average, of being forgettable. Your terror that if you're not fixing someone, you're not worth loving. Every time you try to save them, you're really trying to prove to yourself that you're enough, that you matter, that you have value. This is why hope is so dangerous. Hope keeps you bonded to potential instead of reality. You don't love who they are. You love who they could be if they just tried harder, cared more, changed their patterns. You've built an entire relationship with an imaginary version of them, a version that shows up in your daydreams but never in your real life. That person doesn't exist. That person is a fantasy you created to avoid accepting that you gave your heart to someone incapable of holding it. Jung understood this as fantasy bonding, the psychological trap that keeps empaths returning to empty wells, expecting water. You bond with potential because potential is safe. But the person standing in front of you hurts you repeatedly, apologizes occasionally, and changes never. Every time they hurt you, and then apologize, hope resurfaces. They sound sincere, they look remorseful, and hope whispers that maybe this time will be different. So you stay. The hurt, the apology, the hope, the repeat. But Jung discovered something crucial about toxic patterns. They don't break because someone hopes hard enough. Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. They break when someone sees clearly enough to walk away, and walking away requires killing hope. It requires accepting that no amount of patience, understanding, or unconditional love will transform someone who doesn't want to transform. Detachment begins where hope ends. There comes a moment in every toxic relationship when the empath faces a choice: continue hoping or start seeing. This moment comes in the quiet moments, when you're alone and exhausted, when you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back at you. Jung called this moment the nigredo, the blackening. It feels like giving up, like failure, like abandoning someone who needs you. But Jung knew this darkness isn't the end, it's the beginning. The nigredo is where false hope dies so that real healing can begin. In this darkness, everything you believed about love gets challenged. You believed love meant staying no matter what. You believed compassion meant tolerating disrespect. You believed empathy meant absorbing someone else's pain until you disappeared completely. You believed that if you just loved them enough, eventually they would be able to love you back. But Jung discovered that real love requires boundaries. Real compassion includes self-protection. Real empathy knows when to stop feeling someone else's feelings and start honoring your own. The nigredo forces you into this knowing. It strips away the stories you told yourself about why you stayed. I stayed because they need me. I stayed because they've been through trauma. I stayed because I don't give up. The nigredo exposes these as defenses against truth. You stayed because you were afraid of being alone, of admitting you were wrong, that leaving would mean all the pain was for nothing. It exposes the ways you used their potential as an excuse to avoid your own growth. While you were busy trying to fix them, you didn't have to face the parts of yourself that needed fixing. While you were analyzing their childhood trauma, you didn't have to examine your own wounds. While you were making excuses for their behavior, you didn't have to set boundaries in your own life. They became your project so you wouldn't have to be your own priority. It reveals how hope became a drug you took to numb the reality that you were losing yourself, trying to save someone who didn't want saving. Every time reality got too painful, you took another hit of hope. You reminded yourself of that one good day last month. You focused on that one kind thing they said last week. You convinced yourself that the breadcrumbs they threw you were evidence of a feast to come. But breadcrumbs aren't love. They're just enough to keep you hungry and coming back for more. People confuse detachment with numbness. Jung understood the difference. Numbness is avoidance. You shut down feelings because they're overwhelming. Detachment is conscious observation. You feel everything but attach to nothing. Numbness happens when you're still in the relationship, dying slowly, pretending you're fine. Detachment happens when you consciously choose to stop, giving your energy to someone who drains it. Numbness is passive suffering. Detachment is active boundary setting. Numbness leaves you empty. Detachment brings you home. Jung discovered that empaths often resist detachment because it feels like betrayal. Your mind creates stories to keep you stuck. If you detach, you're proving you never really loved them. If you stop hoping, you're giving up on someone who could still change. Your empathy tells you that everyone deserves another chance, that healing takes time, that patience is a virtue. Your compassion whispers that they're suffering too, that they need your help, that you're the only one who truly understands them, that without you, they'll never get better, that your love is what's keeping them alive. But this thinking keeps you trapped in a cage you built yourself, because real love doesn't require you to disappear. Real love doesn't demand that you sacrifice your peace for someone else's chaos. Real love doesn't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Real love includes loving yourself enough to walk away from relationships that harm you. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their choices without you there to cushion the fall. This is the part where most empaths get stuck. They understand intellectually that they should leave. Friends have told them. Therapists have suggested it. They themselves know, deep down, that the relationship is toxic. They recognize the patterns like reading words in their native language. They know what comes next. They can predict the cycle down to the day, the tension building, the explosion, the apology, the honeymoon phase, the gradual return to tension. But emotionally, they can't let go. Because letting go feels like admitting defeat. It feels like they weren't strong enough, patient enough, loving enough to make it work. It feels like failure, like all the pain they endured was for nothing, like the time they invested is wasted, like proving everyone who warned them was right. But Jung would say this thinking is backwards. Leaving doesn't prove you weren't enough. Leaving proves you finally realized they weren't enough for you, that you deserve better than breadcrumbs, better than potential, better than someday. Consider a case profile that illustrates this pattern. We see this dynamic clearly in the story of a woman facing post-awakening emptiness. Let's call this composite example Maria. This narrative illustration, based on strictly observed patterns in Jung's clinical work, shows someone who spent years seeking enlightenment. After experiencing what mystics call ego death during meditation, Maria felt euphoric for weeks. She had touched the divine. She understood that everything she worried about was ultimately meaningless. But then, something terrifying happened in this illustrative example. Maria couldn't get out of bed. She stopped eating. She quit her job. Not from depression, but from profound indifference. She told Jung in this composite narrative, "I've seen the truth. Nothing matters. Goals are illusions. I can't pretend anymore that any of it has meaning." Jung recognized in patterns like this what he called the nigredo. Maria wasn't experiencing spiritual failure in this illustrative case. She was experiencing the necessary death phase that precedes rebirth. This composite example reveals how people can trigger the nigredo through spiritual practices without understanding what they're entering. Detachment isn't about hating them or seeking revenge. It's about choosing yourself. It's recognizing that the energy you've been pouring into a toxic person needs to come back home to you. Every thought about them, every prayer for their healing, every moment analyzing their behavior. All that energy was yours. Detachment is calling it home. When detachment is complete, something extraordinary happens. You look at the person who consumed your thoughts and you feel nothing. Not hate, not love, neutrality. Jung called this the return. The moment when the energy you poured into the void comes back to you. You remember what wholeness feels like. This neutrality isn't coldness. It's clarity. You see them as they are, not as you hoped they would be. You see them without the filter of your projections, your fantasies, your desperate needs. And what you see is just a person. A flawed, wounded person who treated you poorly. Not a monster to be feared. Not a god to be worshipped. Just a regular person who wasn't capable of meeting you where you are. And that realization is freedom. You see the relationship as it was, not as you needed it to be. You stop rewriting history to make it more palatable. You stop focusing exclusively on the good moments while minimizing the bad ones. You see the whole picture with clear eyes. The love-bombing phase that hooked you. The devaluation phase that confused you. The discarding that broke you. The hoovering that pulled you back in. The cycle that repeated until you finally stepped off the carousel. In that clarity, you realize something profound. You were never trying to save them. You were trying to prove your love was powerful enough to change someone. You were trying to be special enough, worthy enough, lovable enough to be the exception to their pattern. Every toxic person has a trail of people who thought they would be different. You wanted to be the one who finally reached them. But love doesn't change people who don't want to change. Love reveals who people are. They showed you exactly who they were. You just weren't ready to see it until now. The return happens gradually in layers. First, you get your time back. Hours spent obsessing suddenly become available for your own life. You wake up one morning and realize you haven't thought about them in hours, then days, then weeks. The space they occupied in your mind empties out. You have room for your own thoughts again, your own dreams, your own interests, your own identity separate from the relationship. Then you get your energy back. The exhaustion from managing their emotions lifts like a fog clearing. You have energy for your own life again, to exercise, to create, to pursue hobbies, to connect with people who appreciate you. The constant depletion stops. You remember what it feels like to wake up without dread. Then you get your identity back. The parts you suppressed resurface. Your opinions that you learned to keep quiet. Your boundaries that you learned to soften. Your preferences that you learned to hide. The authentic self you filed away because they couldn't handle the real you. Those pieces come home. You remember who you were before you started shrinking yourself to fit into their world. Jung understood this as integration, the process of becoming whole by reclaiming what you gave away. But integration isn't just about getting pieces back. It's about transforming through the process. The empath who returns from detachment isn't the same person who entered the toxic relationship. They're stronger because they've walked through fire and survived. They've faced their deepest fears about abandonment, about worthlessness, about being unlovable, and discovered those fears were lies. Wiser because they've learned painful lessons about love, boundaries, and self-worth that most people never learn. They've integrated their shadow, the part of themselves that needed to be needed, that found worth in being wanted by someone unavailable, that confused intensity with intimacy, that mistook drama for passion. And they've learned that real strength isn't about how much pain you can endure. Real strength is knowing when to walk away. It's recognizing that staying doesn't make you strong or loyal. It makes you stuck. Walking away when you still have feelings, when you still care, when part of you still hopes, that's strength, that's courage, that's self-love in action. The integrated empath becomes what Jung called the conscious individual. no longer a victim of their own compassion, no longer a prisoner of their own sensitivity. They understand that empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. They know that feeling someone's pain doesn't mean absorbing it. They've learned you can care about someone and still choose not to save them. This consciousness changes everything. Relationships become healthier because you stop attracting people who need fixing. You stop seeing potential and start seeing reality. You stop falling for words and start watching actions. Work becomes easier because you stop taking on everyone's emotional burdens. You contribute without overextending. You help without depleting yourself. Life becomes lighter because you're no longer carrying weight that was never yours to carry. Jung discovered something powerful about empaths who complete this journey. They don't become cold, they become discerning. They can still feel deeply, love fully, give generously, but they do it with awareness now. They watch actions instead of listening to words. They notice patterns instead of excusing anomalies. They don't lose their compassion. They direct it wisely. They save their deepest care for people who reciprocate it. They offer their empathy to those who honor it, not those who exploit it. They don't stop feeling deeply. They stop drowning in feelings that aren't theirs. They've learned to distinguish between empathy and absorption, between compassion and codependence, between loving someone and losing themselves. The transformation isn't about becoming less empathic. It's about becoming more conscious. It's about understanding that your gift of empathy is precious and should be given to those who treasure it, not those who take it for granted. And consciousness requires letting go of hope in people who show you repeatedly who they are. It requires accepting that some people can't be saved, and that's not your failure. It's their choice. They're choosing not to heal, not to grow, not to do the work. It requires understanding that losing hope in a toxic person isn't giving up on love. It's choosing to give that love to someone who deserves it, starting with yourself. This is the resolution Jung pointed to, the ending that isn't an ending, but a beginning. When you stop hoping for someone to change and start accepting who they are, you free both of you. You free them from the pressure of your expectations, your needs, your constant desire for them to be something they're not. They no longer have to perform or pretend to match your vision of them. And you free yourself from the prison of your hope, from the endless cycle of disappointment and renewed optimism, from the exhausting work of seeing potential where there's only pattern. This freedom is detachment, and detachment is how the empath comes back. You come back to your body, which you abandoned while you were busy managing their emotions. You start noticing physical sensations again, real hunger, not stress eating, real tiredness, not exhaustion from emotional labor, pleasure in simple things, the warmth of sun on your skin, the taste of food you actually enjoy, the feeling of safety in your own space. You come back to your truth, which you silenced to keep the peace. You start speaking up again, expressing opinions without apologizing, setting boundaries without guilt, saying no and meaning it without feeling like you need to explain or justify. You come back to your dreams, which you postponed because you were too busy saving someone else. You pick up old hobbies that brought you joy before you had no time for yourself. You make plans for your future that don't include them or require their approval. You invest time, energy, and resources in yourself instead of someone who never invested back. You come back to yourself, and that return, that homecoming to who you were before they dimmed your light, is worth every moment of the nigredo darkness you walked through to get here. Jung taught that losing hope in a toxic person is the greatest act of self-love, because it means you finally value your own peace more than their potential. It means you finally understand that you can't love someone into wholeness when they're committed to staying broken. You can't heal someone who finds comfort in their wounds. You can't save someone who doesn't want saving. It means you've graduated from the painful lesson that some people are in your life to teach you about boundaries, not to receive your boundless giving. Some people are mirrors, showing you where you need to love yourself more, where you need to protect yourself better. This isn't failure. This is wisdom earned through experience. This isn't cruelty. This is self-preservation, which is the foundation of all true compassion. You can't pour from an empty cup. This isn't giving up on love. This is refusing to accept counterfeits anymore. This is understanding that love should add to your life, not subtract from it. Real love doesn't require you to lose yourself. Real love doesn't ask you to hope endlessly while being hurt repeatedly. Real love doesn't demand proof of devotion through suffering. Real love is mutual, reciprocal, and honoring. It builds you up instead of breaking you down. It energizes you instead of depleting you. And if what you had wasn't that, if what you experienced was depletion instead of nourishment, constant anxiety instead of peace, then walking away isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of self-love. In the Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get the Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.